Okay, the first thing that I want to talk about is why baseball is my personal favorite sport. I love football, but baseball is different to me. Baseball is the smell of fresh spring air, getting outside, eating a hot dog or popcorn or something like that, going to a game. I would put the in-game experience, like actually physically going to a baseball game experience, up with any other sport. I think it's better than football. I think it's better than basketball. It's not quite as fast and furious on the action, so you have time to chat with the people that you're with. I love baseball. I love the nostalgic value of baseball. I grew up playing baseball, so obviously it carries kind of a special place to me. So every time as we approach baseball season, and as things kind of start to get warmer and all that, it's one of my favorite times of year. I absolutely love it. So this year I wanted to put together a baseball season preview because I want to talk a lot about baseball as we're going through the season, and kind of catch anyone that might not have had their finger on the pulse of what's happened with baseball, a good preview of what we're going to expect to see over the season. What are the hot teams? What did teams do in the offseason to prepare for this year? So I went through all the teams and gave them a rating of they had a bad offseason, they had an average offseason, an above average offseason, or they had a great offseason. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on each of the teams, but I am going to do a quick highlight on each team just to kind of give everyone a heads up. And I think it's the best way to be thorough with a preseason. So these are going to be alphabetical as far as how they sit in the category, and then we'll go to each category from bad all the way to a great offseason. So here are the teams that I picked that had a bad offseason. First of all, the Baltimore Orioles. They have a couple really good prospects. They got Adley Rushman and they have Ryan Mountcastle coming up, but they didn't do anything. They didn't add anybody. It was already a pretty bad team. I don't expect them to be in any kind of contention this year. Baltimore Orioles receive a bad. The Chicago Cubs, they were great 2-3 years ago, but they lost Yu Darvish to the San Diego Padres. They lost Kyle Schwarber, which is a big right-handed bat for them. And they lost John Lester, who's a great starting pitcher. All they did was they add Jock Pederson from the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I would say that team got a lot worse this year compared to last team. So Chicago Cubs got a bad rating from me. And you'll kind of see a trend with how the bad teams compare to the great teams, because a lot of these guys that are on the bad teams that left those teams ended up going to teams that had a really good offseason over on the great side. And just keep in mind that baseball doesn't have a salary cap. So some of these big teams like the Los Angeles Dodgers, like the New York Yankees, they had great off seasons, but that's because they opened the wallets and they paid for some of these smaller market teams. They paid for some of their superstars, or they traded for them to come over. So just kind of if you're not familiar with how baseball trades tend to work out, that's usually what happens. A big market team will go and grab a team off of a smaller market team. So Chicago Cubs, bad rating. My third one, Cleveland Indians, they get a bad rating. They traded away the face of their franchise, Francisco Lindor, to the New York Mets. They also lost Andres Jimenez. So they were a playoff team last year, but I don't know if they did enough to make them good enough this year. We'll see where they wind up on the power rankings. The Colorado Rockies, also a very bad rating. They lost their perennial MVP candidate third baseman, Nolan Arenado, and possibly the worst trade I've ever seen. Not only did they send him to the St. Louis Cardinals, but they also sent $50 million to the Cardinals to pay for some of the contract that they gave him, and they got nothing in return. So Colorado Rockies, really bad grade. The Los Angeles Angels, me being a Trout fan, even though I'm a Ranger fan, I like Trout. I always hope that every offseason they're going to go out and give him support, give him a pitching staff that can actually carry them to the playoffs. I would love to see Mike Trout in the playoffs. They get a bad rating from me because they didn't do that. They didn't go out and really surround him with anyone. They really needed to work on that pitching staff. They didn't address those issues on the offseason. They get a bad rating from me.
Okay.
The Pittsburgh Pirates, they picked up a whole slew of prospects, but that's what small market teams have to do. They have to rely on developing guys, but they tend to lose their stars when they get there. So they're prospecting, but they didn't really make any moves. My very last bad rating on an offseason for a team is the Tampa Bay Rays. They made it all the way to the World Series. They were awesome last year.
What?
Do what?
Bad? Tampa Bay? What?
Yeah. Yeah, now I'm not saying they're going to be a bad team. They just had a really bad offseason. So they lost Blake Snell. Blake Snell could have won that game in the World Series for them, but they took him out for whatever reason. Anyways, he's gone. He went bye-bye. They also lost Charlie Morton, which is another stud starting pitcher for them. So they got a lot of ground to make up. Someone's really going to have to step up in their pitching rotation for them to have a chance to make it that deep into the playoffs this year. So I just don't – their team is definitely worse, and they're going to have some young guys step up. So they're my final bad rating there. All right, moving over to the average teams. The Arizona Diamondbacks, they have a good team. They just didn't do a lot this year in the offseason. They didn't move a whole lot of pieces. They didn't really gain. They didn't lose. They didn't really gain. I didn't have a whole lot of notes for the Diamondbacks. I don't follow that team a lot. So put them right in the average category. No big splashes there. The Boston Red Sox, obviously a big market team. You expect them to bring in big talent, stuff like that. They didn't this year. And in fact, not only did they not bring in a big fish, they lost Andrew Benintendi, who was supposed to be their third or fourth year stud. He's gone. So the Red Sox, I think, got worse over the offseason. Just don't think that we're going to see them step up to beat the Yankees in that division. The Cincinnati Reds. It seems like every year the Cincinnati Reds are the perennial dark horse favorite. I'm tired of waiting for the Cincinnati Reds to take that dark horse step. They didn't really add anybody big. They didn't lose anybody big. They lost Trevor Bauer. They did add a couple pieces, but I just put them at an average ranking. I don't think that they're really going to do too much with that. All right. Detroit Tigers, another team with a bunch of young studs. They got Spencer Torkelson, who was the number one pick in the draft. We'll probably see him play. They got Casey Mize, who's a young rookie stud starting pitcher. He started a couple of games last year, but I think they're going to consider this his rookie season. So another team kind of like the Orioles, where they have a bunch of people that if they develop and they step up, they're going to be really good here in a couple of years. I just don't think that they did. They re-signed Jonathan Scope this offseason, which is a really underrated second baseman. So it's a good thing that they kept him on the team, but I don't really think they're going to do too much this year. All right, the Houston Astros. They lost center fielder George Springer. There you go. They lost him to Toronto Blue Jays. They were able to re-sign Michael Brantley, who's another really good outfielder, and they really needed to do that to kind of shore up their outfield. And they'll be a good team. I still think that they probably win the AL West, but losing George Springer, that's pretty tough. That's why I put them in the average category. I think they'll still be good, but I don't see how losing an all-star center fielder could make the team better. They got Pedro Baez from the Dodgers. He's a stud pitcher. But I think it's kind of a wash. If not, maybe they're a little bit worse. All right, Miami Marlins. Again, kind of a perennial underperforming team. They signed Adam Duvall. I don't have a lot there. Kind of same with the Milwaukee Brewers. The Milwaukee Brewers were hurt last year from a slumping Christian Yelich. When you have a guy that's won the MVP and you're in a small market, you have to have that guy perform. The Milwaukee Brewers, since he had such a down year last year, they just kind of fell apart, and There weren't any real notes to what they did in the offseason, so kind of give them an average rating there. Oakland Athletics, they lost Liam Hendricks and Marcus Semien. They added Elvis Andrus, the Ranger, one of my favorite players. He's gone. They traded him to the Athletics. Just an average move. And I'll kind of buzz through these average ratings because the real spicy bits are kind of the above average and the great offseason teams. Philadelphia Phillies, they re-signed a couple of their big players. Good for them. Seattle Mariners, they have I think they have the best farm system in all of baseball. So just kind of waiting on those prospects to pan out. No real signings there. And then I put my Texas Rangers in the average category as well. They added Chris Davis, which is a big bat from the Oakland Athletics. But they lost Elvis Andrus and they lost Lance Lynn, who was a Cy Young contender last year. You'll see where he went to in one of the teams coming up. So I don't think that they're going to be very good this year. In fact, I really think my Rangers are going to struggle this year. So just
That's
an average offseason
par
for
for the
them.
course these days in Texas Ranger land.
Yeah, the glory days of my Texas Rangers with Michael Young and Napoli and Nelly Cruz and Josh Hamilton, like those days are long gone. We're like, all right, my above average teams. These are the teams that we will probably start expecting to reach the playoffs here. The Kansas City Royals. They went out and added Carlos Santana, Andrew Benintendi, and Mike Minor from my Rangers. All really, really solid players. Andrew Benintendi has the chance to be a superstar. He couldn't do it in Boston. Let's see what he can do in Kansas City. They definitely had a good offseason. The only reason they're not up in the great categories because some of these teams in the Major League Baseball had some of the craziest off seasons that I can ever remember with some of the big names moving around. So really good offseason for the Royals. The Minnesota Twins, they re-signed Nelly Cruz, who is still crushing balls at like 40 years old. They added J.A. Happ, Andrelton Simmons. They had an awesome they had a really, really good team already, and they added those names to the team. I expect them to be really good this year. I think the Twins are going to be really good in the Central Division. The Washington Nationals, another team 2 years removed from winning a World Series. They went out and added Josh Bell from the Pirates. They added Brad Hand, who's a crazy right-handed reliever, so they shored up that bullpen. And they added Kyle Schwarber, who had a down year last year, but he's a big, big right-handed bat. That team only got better. So Washington Nationals, above average. All right, moving on to the great offseasons. And keep in mind, guys, these ratings are for what kind of offseason I felt like they had, not necessarily their team strength. We'll go over that with the power rankings. All right, the great offseasons. Starting off, the Atlanta Braves. They were one game away from going to the World Series against the Dodgers. Couldn't pull it off. They kept all of their big names, including Marcell Ozuna, who could have gone to free agency and got a lot of money somewhere else. So that was really big for them. And they added Charlie Morton from Tampa Bay, who is going to make that starting pitching lineup awesome. Probably one of the best in the National Leagues. So I really think that the Atlanta Braves had a great offseason. They only got stronger. They're going to be a really, really tough team over there in the National League Eastern Division. All right, the Chicago White Sox, and I really like the Chicago White Sox. They have Eloy Jimenez. They got Lou Bob. They added Lance Lynn. And I know that he's older, but just watching him pitch last year, and I watched a lot of games that he pitched, they got an awesome pitcher to add to that team. They didn't lose any big names, so I think that they're probably going to win. It's going to be them and the Twins in the AL Central, and that's going to be a really tight race. It's going to be a fun one to watch. So White Sox, great rating. All right, in what I think is the second craziest offseason of any team, and keep in mind this is alphabetical order here, so if I had to power rank them, I would say this is the second best offseason of any team. The Los Angeles Dodgers added Trevor Bauer, Blake Trinan. They re-signed Justin Turner, and all of that, all they lost was Jock Pederson. So The World Series champions only added to it. They added one of the best pitchers in baseball. Maybe a one-hit wonder, maybe not. We'll find out. But you can't say that adding him to that bullpen or to that starting lineup isn't going to be insane. It's going to be crazy. So Los Angeles Dodgers got a great rating from me. All right, I got both New York teams up next, the Yankees and the Mets. I'll start with the Yankees. They added DJ LeMahieu. They added Corey Kluber, who's a previous Cy Young winner from the Rangers. You notice a common trend here. All the Rangers' good players are going somewhere else. And Jamison Talon. They added Darren O'Day, Jay Bruce, and Robinson Trinos. I mean, that's a crazy amount of talent. That's 6 players that the Yankees added to a team that was already pretty good. You're going to see here their playoff percentage is really, really high, so they definitely like them in the American League East winning that division. I completely agree. They're totally stacked up and down. All right, the craziest offseason of any team in Major League Baseball had to have been the New York Mets. They added Francisco Lindor, who is a top 5 talent in all of Major League Baseball, for basically nothing going back to the Cleveland Indians. They added Carlos Carrasco, who is also an all-star, crazy player there, Trevor May, James McCann, and they also added a giant eye roll from every other team in Major League Baseball because they basically just wrecked shop this offseason. They went nuts. They paid a lot of players, and they got a lot better. So I think the New York Mets are going to be pretty they're going to go pretty deep in the playoffs for the National League there. All right, the St. Louis Cardinals, they got Nolan Arenado over from the Colorado Rockies. Notice that all the teams that were in the bad category usually gave up a superstar to a team in the good category. So Nolan Arenado came over to the St. Louis Cardinals, and they re-signed 2 of their big names, Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina. Just adding Nolan Arenado alone is worth saying that they're in the great category. They're going to be really good this year. Probably go beat up on the Brewers and the Cubs. So, yeah, Cardinals had a really good offseason. And the last team, the Toronto Blue Jays, they signed George Springer from the Houston Astros. They signed Marcus Semien, Kirby Yates, and David Phelps. That is a young team with one of my personal favorite guys, Bo Bichette. They have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on that team. They got Calvin Biggio. That'll be a fun team to watch too. They are the only team that can even challenge the Yankees in that division, in my opinion. So if the young guys really play well, they have a chance. So there you have it. That got you caught up on what happened this offseason.